Welcome to Wired for This, a deep dive into how we think, believe, change, and connect. In this limited series, we explore the psychology of human behavior and neuroscience. What drives us forward, what holds us back, and how we navigate a world bursting with noise, contradiction, and complexity. Today, we'll hear from Dr. Paul O'Keefe, a social psychologist and associate professor of organisational behaviour at the University of Exeter Business School. His research examines how psychological barriers, particularly beliefs about abilities, interests, and opportunity, shape the goals people pursue and their potential to achieve them. He and his team design growth mindset interventions, tested through randomized controlled field experiments to help people thrive in work, education, and health contexts. Dr. O'Keefe also directs the Mindsets and Motivation Lab and serves as an associate editor at the Journal of Experimental Psychology General. From American Scientist, I'm Celia Ford, and you're listening to Wired for This.
The dirty little secret in my field is that a lot of us conduct me-search. So the reason we conduct certain work is because it affected us at some point. And certainly in my case, that was true. You know, early on, I had a very typical, what happens to a lot of students. Elementary school is really great. It goes pretty smoothly. And then middle school hits and everything changes. Not only biologically, but everything's getting more difficult. You're graded more harshly. More is expected of you. And we very reliably see that this is where a lot of students take a big hit. And I definitely did. And it's the time of my life I started to really question my competence. And I started to develop my ideas about the nature of intelligence and abilities. It seemed that some people just had it and maybe I didn't. I had it maybe in some areas, but not in other areas. And it was really profoundly crippling to me. Like it really felt like I was sort of imprisoned and I didn't know how to work my way out of it. Literally, I didn't know how to that I could actually work hard and maybe do really, really well. So I did with what a lot of kids did, and you focus more on not looking stupid and focused on maybe showing off when you do have a certain ability, but it wasn't about learning and working hard to learn. It's about survival, and that lasted for me throughout high school. I definitely was better in high school, but I still held those same really bad beliefs that were, I didn't realize at the time that the beliefs were holding me back. And toward the end of high school, I really had a series of experiences that all brought to light that my own beliefs were what was holding me back. It wasn't my genetics. It wasn't this or that. It was what was in my head. And I started to challenge my own thoughts in my head, the things that were holding me back, and decided to experiment with myself and say, well, what if I did really work really hard? Could I be a fantastic student? And sure enough, I really, really focused and I started to become a really good student. And it got me out of that bubble that I was living in that said, whatever level of intelligence you have is just kind of what you have. And it really broke me out of that. And I realized that I had so much more potential than I ever thought. And of course, you start thinking, if this is true for me, isn't it true for so many other people? So my interests in psychology really stemmed from that, how incredibly motivating it was to learn that intelligence and other things were malleable, that they can be improved upon. You weren't stuck at some level. And that's what I've been studying ever since. I've been fascinated with that stuff and figuring out ways to remove those barriers that help people create a path toward whatever goals they have for themselves.
Yeah, which I think it's a really important line of work, because I do think that a lot of people are trapped in that feeling that intelligence is something that you either have or you don't. And I think it does hold a lot of people back. But I know that you study mindset specifically, which is one of those concepts in psychology that I think that I understand until I try to define it myself. And then I only land on mindsets are how I set my mind. It's like I think I know what I'm talking about, but then I try to put words to it and I don't. So I'll ask you, what are mindsets exactly?
When we think about mindsets, we're talking about belief systems, fundamental beliefs people have about themselves, about other people, about the world. And these beliefs that we develop, they influence how we interpret our experiences. And they indicate how we should respond in certain situations. In other words, they're lenses through which we take in a lot of information. We're not these objective observers of the world. We're not neutral observers. Everything's being filtered through our own psychological processes. And one of those that's very important are our fundamental beliefs, our pre-existing beliefs, right? And a subset of these beliefs that we have to do with the malleability of things. So we could have fixed mindsets about certain things, or a growth mindset. So a fixed mindset suggests that an attribute or some aspect of the world is fixed in some way. It's not really going to change. And a growth mindset refers to the idea that there's something that's changeable or improvable.
Can you tell me more about the tools that your research group uses to study squishy, nebulous concepts like mindsets and goal pursuit?
One, at the most basic level, we have developed questionnaires.
So these questionnaires ask people whether they agree with statements like, you might be able to learn things here and there, but your core intelligence level won't really change. Or you can be exposed to new things, but your core interests won't really change.
And we can use these questionnaires to predict certain outcomes, resilience, aspects of goal pursuit, success, and so forth. So that's at the very basic level. In the laboratory, we might want to teach people a certain mindset that might last a temporary amount of time and give them some tasks.
One way they do this is to give people an easy-to-read research article about something like the malleability of intelligence, or how interest can be developed.
What that does is it puts them in a very temporary mindset where they're thinking along those lines of that type of mindset and its usefulness. In the field, which is something that I do a lot of, we do interventions, and the purpose there is a bit different. We're not trying to do something temporary. So instead of changing people's minds in the short run, we're actually looking to really fundamentally change the way people think about something that will help them in a much more adaptive way. For those, we use something that's a technique called WISE interventions. And these are usually very short. It's some light reading and reflective writing exercises. But everything in that intervention is really designed to get them to really, truly think about, say, the way that they think about the nature and workings of intelligence or interests very differently. And we use a lot of what we understand in the psychological literature to really make that change happen.
We'll be right back.
I4 2025 registration is now open. Be among the first to register for I4 2025, Sigma Xi's annual conference featuring award-winning research presentations, keynote speakers, and panels. This year's virtual format offers an international conference experience at affordable rates with no travel required. Visit www.experiencei4.org to learn more and register today.
You're listening to Wired for this. You mentioned that when faced with challenges, some people tend to give up more quickly than others do. But this may not be a permanently ingrained trait. It's something that we can change if we want to. So, what factors shape how resilient we are, and how can we adapt how resilient we are?
Well, so as you might suspect, there's just so much that goes into what would make people resilient. Let's take a student in a class who got a bad grade on, say, a math test. That's going to be demoralizing for anybody. Nobody wants that. But you might have two students in the exact same classroom who are reacting very differently. Someone with a fixed mindset who believes that their intelligence cannot improve. What that failure suggests to them is that they've maxed out. They've hit their ceiling. For them, they're not resilient in this case. But if you look at it from the perspective of someone with a growth mindset of intelligence, it's a totally different interpretation of the situation. You get a bad grade, it's a bummer, but you think, okay, I didn't get it yet. Maybe I need to work harder, longer. Maybe I need to have better study strategies. But I believe fundamentally that the nature of intelligence is that I can become smarter. So it only stands to reason that I would keep trying and I would be resilient to those failures. When we talk about grit, has a lot to do with perseverance and liking what you're doing. A growth mindset is really feeding into that type of disposition where you're more gritty, because your entire framework for understanding a situation like this, where you're experiencing setbacks or failure, it's all leading to this very logical outcome that says, I can figure this out.
It sounds like failure is an important, necessary part of learning and growing. And I'm wondering how we can create environments, maybe in the classroom or in the workplace, that make failure feel less scary to people.
A lot of classrooms don't do that so much. So, for example, a very typical classroom might grade students on a curve. Once you grade students on a curve, what you're saying is that this is all about evaluation. This is not about learning. It's about being evaluated. And you're going to be evaluated harshly. And what matters is not just your own personal improvement, if there is any. It matters how good you are compared to your classmates. These types of things can really create an environment that isn't so much about learning and where failure is terrible. It's shameful and it's embarrassing. It's about performing. It's about looking competent.
In one study, Paul and his colleagues tracked middle school age kids who were used to regular performance-oriented classroom environments in a summer program that was all about the love of learning, not grades or evaluation. They saw that in this summer program, kids focused more on learning and stopped basing their self-worth on other people's approval.
And then you track them back when they go back to their school again, and then you see that everything returns to how it was. A lot of what that environment did in that summer program is it minimized the importance of evaluation. We saw a lot of really healthy changes under that summer program. And then it just shows that how situational that can be, because they went back and everything went back to how it was.
So, what actually helps people stay motivated while they're slogging through a long-term project like finishing college? It sounds like maybe counterintuitively de-emphasizing the perfection of that final product is helpful. What other strategies help people stick with hard things?
Having this fundamental belief and understanding that you can improve. It's not just good enough to have this mindset. Oh, I'm just going to go in there with a growth mindset. That's very temporary. What I'm advocating for is people need to understand that this is a more accurate way of really how the world works and how intelligence works, how a lot of opportunities work. We need to fundamentally understand, because when you are confronted with those problems, you now have this understanding that, oh, okay, this is a setback. This isn't a dead end. This is a setback. This is an obstacle I can go over or around. I don't have to just turn back and head back to the beginning. Having this mindset and maintaining it throughout the duration of your pursuits is extremely important.
I want to switch gears and talk about this great piece you wrote for Scientific American a little while back. Basically, you told people to stop trying to find their passions and start developing passions instead. I was absolutely taught to find my passion. Was that wrong?
I was told to find my passion too. It's very typical, common, ubiquitous advice. It comes from people we really trust and look up to, like our parents, our teachers, our mentors, our commencement speakers. And this is really well-intended advice, right? This is meant to inspire. This is meant to motivate. And it's meant to set people on a path for a life of fulfillment. Pursuing your passion should be related to living a fulfilling life. But my colleagues and I in this work started to question, what does it mean to find your passion? Well, hidden within that is something possibly problematic. And that's that if it's something to be found, then that means that it already exists, that it's something within you, it's inherent, and you just need to uncover it. That's just not how interests and passions work. It's much more accurate to say that they're developed. So we started to examine people's fundamental beliefs about the nature and workings of interest and passion. And we found that a sizable group of people believe that their interests are inherent and just need to be found. And that when they do find them, they'll be fully formed, raring to go, and everything's going to be easy from then on out. But a lot of other people have a fundamentally different belief. They believe that interests are developed, that it takes time. You have to get involved.
Another lie, maybe, that I was told growing up is that if I did find my true passion, then I would be endlessly motivated to pursue it, right? This idea that if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. I do love what I do, but I still feel like I'm working plenty of days in my life. And your research, I think, suggests that that's not necessarily the case. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Maybe any other misconceptions about passion that we need to address while we're at it?
This is something that we examined directly. We wanted to know what people with a fixed and a growth mindset were thinking about a passion. Those with a fixed mindset, we find that they think it's just going to provide them with limitless motivation, limitless inspiration. Kind of like what we say about relationships, love conquers all. Well, that this passion is going to conquer all. Very similar type of thinking across those two domains. But people with a growth mindset, we asked them and they said, no, it'd be difficult at times. You know, it's a developmental process. So why wouldn't there be setbacks? Why wouldn't there be challenges and frustration, maybe some boredom and tedium? Of course. And that is a more realistic way of thinking. But these are two very fundamentally different expectations of what it would mean to pursue a new interest or passion.
Back in 2018, Paul's research group tested this out with a group of college students. They had people watch a fun little video from The Guardian about black holes to pique their interest in astronomy, and everyone said they loved it. Consider interest sparked. Then they had those same students engage with the same topic, black holes, they just said they loved, but at a higher difficulty level. They had students read the first page of a scientific article about it. Not quite as fun.
Amazingly, the people with a fixed mindset of interest who minutes ago said that they were fascinated by this topic, now, on average, said that they don't like it. The way that we interpret this is that they had an expectation for what interest would do for them. It should have made for smooth sailing, and it didn't. So they may have reevaluated this and said, oh, I guess I was mistaken. This isn't an interest after all. But when we looked at the people with the growth mindset, they were still interested. They maintained an interest, even though they reported the same levels of difficulty in reading this article. They never had this expectation that it would be easy, and therefore that expectation was never violated. when we think about how that would apply to the real world, I mean, taking on new roles at work or new tasks, responsibilities at work, or taking new classes at school, when you're thinking about who's the person I'm going to grow into being, if you have this idea that this spark of interest is going to carry you through it and make it easy, those people might just give up. They might not take that next class. They might not get that next promotion because they just never liked it enough. People with a growth mindset, they never expected it to be easy, and it didn't affect their interest. They still liked it.
This makes me think about the math classes I took growing up. I really loved math when I was young because it was taught in a fun, easy way, and I was lucky to have great teachers. But as I carried on through school and went through plenty of not so great teachers, I stopped being interested in it. And the sad thing is, I never really regained that interest in math either.
And that can have to do with your teacher's mindset, your parents' mindset. We call these implicit theories in our field because these are theories we have about the world or ourselves that we don't even know about. Our parents, our mentors, teachers, they think in very subtle ways, they teach us their mindset. They're playing a role in your interest in math and whether that's going to really be lasting or if it's something that's just going to fade away.
More after the break. This podcast is supported by Sigma Xi, the Scientific Honor Society, and its members. To support nonprofit science journalism, please subscribe to American Scientist or donate to Sigma Xi at sigmaxi.org. That's sigmaxi.org. You're listening to Wired for this. Okay, say that someone comes up to you and says, I don't love my job, I don't really have any hobbies, I want to pick up a fun new activity, but I have no idea where to start. What advice would you give to someone who's curious about developing a new interest, but doesn't really know how?
You have to know what the problem is. What is the psychological barriers? If it's that they don't know what's interesting, inculcating a growth mindset of interest can help them consider new interests. This is something that we've studied quite a bit. It might be the problem that they don't see the relevance of certain things. It's an unfortunate fact of our school system, our curriculum, that we teach a lot of kids stuff that could not be less relevant to them in their lives at that time. At a time in their life when they just might want to think about dating or think about sleepovers or any number of things. We're trying to get them to care about branches of government, stuff like that. That can be very, very challenging. And one successful way of making this happen is championed by my colleague, Judith Harakevich, where we get them to think about what we call utility value of whatever it is that we need them to be interested in. In other words, how is it useful to you?
A little more on utility value. Judy Harakevich, psychology professor at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, has done a bunch of studies where she has students write about how the material they're learning, whether it's math or biology or something else, might be relevant in their real lives. And she's found that just thinking about how something can be useful usually makes it more interesting.
The problem could also be opportunities. For them, they want to be a musician, but they don't know anybody who has a guitar, or they don't know anybody with a recording equipment. They're just on their own. That might be something that is stopping them. If they have a fixed mindset, they might think, well, maybe, hopefully I'll meet somebody someday and I can borrow their guitar. Someone with a growth mindset, if we can, teach them that way of thinking, they might be thinking, wow, how can I make this happen? I wonder if I could ask around school. Maybe I could borrow a guitar from a friend, or maybe I could intern at a recording studio and get some experience. Now that is making it so they're going out, getting the opportunities that they want to really pursue their own interests and things that they think would be really exciting. Understanding what that barrier is and what we could do to remove that barrier.
And earlier, you did admit that you started pursuing this line of work in part for the sake of me search, right? So, has your work ended up influencing your own approach to your personal and professional challenges?
Oh, without question. The effect of failures and setbacks, as I said before, that never goes away. If I apply for a grant and I don't get it, it's a real bummer. It's a heartbreaker. You put in a lot of work, you're really excited about this huge new project you want to do, and you don't get the funding. And you have to start all over again. And it could take another year before you get the next answer. But when you understand that this is the nature of things and that this perseverance, this grit, this way of thinking that, okay, maybe I didn't write as great of a grant as I thought I did. Maybe I should go back and look. Maybe I should get some trusted colleagues to give me some feedback. Maybe I'm blind to something here that they won't be blind to. Maybe I didn't sell it. I didn't market it the way I should have. I could have framed it differently to really have a bigger impact. Even in my career now, I'm always thinking about this, about how I could use that. And I also think about how I can use this as a teacher. I'm constantly thinking about how can I make it so my students and my advisees understand that when it feels like they've hit a brick wall, it's not. It's a hurdle that they have to deal with and they have to figure out how to get over it. For example, I won't say you didn't get it. I said you didn't get it yet. And you can do it also with the feedback we give people. If they say do a really great job on a paper or research project, I don't tell them that they're smart. I don't say, wow, you must be really smart. Because what that does is that suggests that the reason they did well is because they have the magic, the gift, the smarts. And then when they inevitably work on the next task that at some point will be very difficult and they will get very frustrated, they won't do very well on, they will interpret that in a way that says, well, I was smart enough for that other one, but I'm not smart enough for this one. And that's demoralizing, it's demotivating. But if you praise students for their effort, when they do really well, then the next time they encounter something really, really difficult, they realize, well, in that last one, I did well because I worked hard. On this one, I didn't do as well, but I think I could work even harder and accomplish this.
As we wrap up, I'm curious, like if I gave you a soapbox to stand on and you could say, there's this one intervention or application of my work that seems to be really, really helpful, and I wish everybody would apply this, whether it's in the classroom or with their kids or anything. Like, can you think of one thing that seems like it's the most obvious or the most helpful?
When people have this preconceived notion that they are a certain type of person and that's the bubble that they're going to live in, they are going to miss out on so much of what life has to offer and how it could enrich them. I'm very excited about the research that we've done in that area, those interventions.
In a study published this year in the journal Contemporary Educational Psychology, Paul and his colleagues followed a group of incoming pre-college students. Those students overwhelmingly identified as big science nerds and had applied to this particular school because it had been historically known for its awesome science curriculum. But recently, the school introduced a new multidisciplinary curriculum that would require all of these sciencey students to step outside of their comfort zone and take art classes too. So, Paul's team gave these students a growth theory of interest intervention. Essentially, a series of quick reading and reflective writing prompts designed to get these students thinking about how their interests aren't fixed and they can be developed over time. And compared to students who didn't do this, the students that got the intervention reported feeling more interested in arts and science, and they felt a stronger sense of belonging at their new multidisciplinary school.
And they're more open to this new area that they had previously closed off. So to me, that's really exciting. They don't have to be fascinated by everything, but to develop these interests, to expand yourself, to expand your knowledge and your experiences, that's really beneficial.
Oh, that's great. And before you go, do you have any ongoing work that you're especially excited about or anything else that you want to plug?
Well, The stuff that I'm really excited about now is the work that we're doing on implicit theories of opportunity. So opportunity mindsets. It's important to acknowledge that, we do live in a world where opportunity is not equal, and we don't live in a fair or just world. And there really are differences in opportunity among people. But to the extent that people can carve out their own path and believe that they can carve out some path and get the opportunities that they need to accomplish their goals, so far in our research, we found that it's very advantageous. So we've been developing interventions, and we've been working with transitioning veterans. So these are people who are just finishing up their military service, and they're about to go from this super structured, ideally socialized environment where things are a lot clearer. There's a clearer path to promotion than there is in the civilian world. So they go from this to this very capitalistic and less structured civilian world. And that is a transition that is extremely difficult for very good reason for many veterans. What we're doing now is we're teaching them versus a control condition that their opportunities can be cultivated. So even when they don't feel that they have the opportunities they need to pursue the goals that they have, for example, employment, they can actually change those circumstances. We're really excited because for me, this is an extremely meaningful group of people to work with. It's a population that has not been researched enough in our field, in my opinion. So I'm very excited about this project, and we're hoping that it helps a lot of them as they make that very, very difficult transition to the next chapter of their life.
Thank you for doing that work, and thanks again for being here. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
A big thanks to Paul O'Keefe for joining us on this episode of Wired for This. You can find links to our sources in the episode description. You've been listening to a podcast by American Scientist, published by Sigma Xi, the Scientific Honor Society. Wired for This is produced and edited by Nabata Inani and hosted by me, Celia Ford. Thanks for listening.